Good evening everyone and welcome to the first Matt Hayes fishing show live here on YouTube. If I make any mistakes with the software, please forgive me because it is my first time on YouTube, so I'm bound to make some mistakes. And what tonight's all about really is the opportunity for you to come on here and start asking me questions. It's a little bit like the old days when I used to have the Total Fishing programme coming to you sort of live from my study down in Shropshire. We're pretty much doing the same thing here. So it's a modern thing, of course, with YouTube rather than watching it on the telly. But the great thing is that you can actually interact by adding your comments and questions, like Andy Prest, who's definitely watching. I up Matt, he says, hello, Matthew Randall. How are you, mate? Nice to see you on here as well. I have actually got quite an interesting show lined up for you tonight. If you've not watched the Matt Hayes Fishing Show before, it's a mixture of your feedback and questions. Hello there, Kazza Morningstar. Turner, I see that you've changed your online name, Kazza. Very good. So without further ado, let me just show you what's coming up in this show. It's pretty good, actually. For a start off, Babs Kijewski catches what for her is a personal best carp. And this fish is just over 25 kilos. Got some awesome catfishing action, with catfish being caught on lures. I don't know whether you like catfishing as much as some of the guys on Facebook do, but they love it. Lee Morris is here. He's doing carp kitchen for us in conjunction with DNA Baits. Good evening, Peter Marsden. And the Duke's here, trying to convince me that fishing for eels is good fun and failing. How about this guy, Derek Spence? Very, very hot at 86. Still catching fish like a bagging machine. Good on you, Derek. Hello, Casual Front, Sean Hincliffe. Want to learn to cast like a pro? Well, I'm the man to show you. And on this rare occasion, I got one right. We'll look at that later. And we're going to have a good look at eels and the day when I met the elvermen of the lower Severn. That was a really interesting session. Let's see who's watching tonight. Andrew Kenworthy, Jason Fern, the Casual Front, Sean Hincliffe, Tim Perrin, how are you, Tim? James Smith, Leroy Reid, how are you, Leroy? See, I told you I'd do it. Joe Alexander, the old Black Country piker, good lad. I always give a big shout out to anyone from the Black Country. All Yam Yams welcome. And, of course, anyone from the Midlands. It is, of course, God's part of the country as far as I'm concerned. But anyone is welcome. So, if you've got any questions for me, please feel free to start popping them into the feed now so I can have a look at them. Matthew Randall saying he loves cats, especially off the surface on bread. Well, you must know something I don't, mate, because I've never caught one off the surface on bread, Matthew, but there's something in your bread I'm not using, boy. But anyway, maybe you'll explain it to me one day. Comic Josh, Woody Wood Prepper, Kevin Smitherman, hi Kevin, Jason Greaves, evening Sir Jason, how are you, sir? Okay, let's have a look at one of these films now. Let's just have a look at Babs Kijewski, who is a German fisher of quite some quality, actually. I first worked with Babs about 4 or 5 years ago when we did a series in Ontario together, and also a little bit of 24-hour rod race, and she was brilliant. So Babs, if you're watching tonight, she is a regular watcher of the show on Facebook, so you never know, Babs might be watching. Hello, Phil Coupland. Let's give it over for Babs.
Schwanzflosse ist. Oh mein Gott, ist der groß. Du Scheiße, ist der groß. Oh mein, guck mal, wie groß der Schädel ist. Schau dir den mal an. Ist das ein Riesenfisch? Moment, ich heb ihn mal kurz an. Ob ich das überhaupt schaffe? Oh mein Gott. Unfassbar.
Well, I tell you what, that's some carp from anywhere, and I know that it was over 50 pounds, 25 and a bit kilos. That probably what makes it about 53, 54, huge fish. Steve Keeler is the Black Country piker, and apparently, Steve, you come from Old Hill. I used to go out with a girl from Old Hill, actually. She was actually the niece of Bonzo Bonham many, many years ago. Jeffrey Bow, Twist 3D Psycho. Hi, Matt. I'll tell you what, mate. I did well getting your name out there. You've got to give it to me. Reese Medcalf, Andy Prest, Harry D, Harry Maxon as well, Peter Dell, Mark Gould, one of our competition winners on the other side, I think, on Facebook. Carolyn Kingsnorth. Hello, Carolyn. I know that you and your family are all watching because I saw one of the previous comments that kind of popped on the screen, on and off the screen. So good evening to you all, Kingsnorth. How are you? Great to see you on here. And you, Joe Alexander. Anybody got any questions for me? Because you're all saying hello and it's lovely to see you all. Paul Bottrell. But if you've got any questions, please put them up and I'll do my best to answer them for you, because the way this show works is that it gets busier and busier every week. So this kind of freewheeling time starts to become a little bit stretched. Evening, Harry D, to you. While I wait for you to come up with your questions, I'm going to give you something to think about here. I've been amazed at the popularity of catfish online recently on social media. It's just literally come out of nowhere how many of you are fishing for catfish. And of course, it's probably one of the toughest fish you'll ever catch in fresh water. We all know that. But I think for many of us, especially those fishing in Britain, it's about the toughest fish you're going to get, full stop, including stuff in saltwater. So I totally understand the appeal. For me, one of the really nice things that's happening at the moment with predator fishing and with catfishing in particular is the rise of lure fishing. Suddenly we've begun to realise that we don't just have to bait fish for catfish, but like pike, we can also catch them on lures. Now, I picked this up early last week on a site run by a company called Svartzonker, who are part of the Abu Garcia setup. And I've been using some of their lure fishing stuff for a while, actually, and it really is top-notch gear. But regardless of that, they've put out this film of one of their people catching some catfish on a small river. Just have a look at this. It's absolutely amazing. It kind of starts off a little bit arty like this, and there's a really nice music soundtrack if you watch it. Brendan Ollick, good evening. Godavros, how are you? Matthew Underwood and Linda Saxon. Hello, Linda. So it starts off just sort of going through a bit of grass, but there you go. Look at that tiny apologetic little dorsal fin. That's a giveaway. And there you have it, folks. There aren't many fish that can turn water like these babies. And this time he's using a basic jig setup. Interesting that he's using a low profile multiplier style reel. Of course, with a heavy lure, you're going to get good casting in with that. Now he's switched over to a fixed spool. And I wonder whether that is deliberate, whether it's offering him any advantage. I prefer a fixed spool for jig style fishing and a low profile style, particularly for jerk baiting and crank baiting. But there you go, he's into a fish. Now, I've got one of these rods, and I can tell you, to stick a bend in it, it's got to be a fair fish. Look at the size of the river, though. It's almost like some tiny channel. And there's the lure. Whacking great, colourful. Looks like curly tail grub, basically. Just a massive one on a big 1 ounce jig head. And there's the cat's maw. It's a really, really nice setup, though. And what a cool way to catch catfish. Oh, he's in again this time. Really look at the narrowness of the channel. It's almost like a tributary of the River Teme or something. I wonder if it's in France or even Eastern Europe. I have no idea. But he's playing that fish hard and well. This is a beautiful shot. Look at the creamy yellow colour across the back and then the cracks and crazy paving. And there you go. What an absolutely fabulous result. And I would imagine one heck of a fight. Beautiful. Well, it's not a beautiful fish. It's an ugly great brute. But to us, it's beautiful. You know what I mean. Fabulous, fabulous catfish. So there you go, folks. That was produced by Svartzonker, who are a really interesting company. Got some great lure fishing stuff. Check them out online because they really are cool. Christopher H. Christopher was out in Singsås, where I live in Norway, and saw me filming the parade. Good to see you, mate. It was an amazing day. I actually went out with the local community, taking our ice cream and pop to all the families in different farms and different parts of the community. Normally, we all get together for a massive big parade, but of course, in these current times, it's not really possible. So we all went out on trucks and just met hundreds of people. It was just awesome, awesome. Jason Greaves says, small river chubbing. I fancy being unorthodox and trying cheese paste. I have success with it in the winter, but would it work in the summer? It does. It's particularly good at night, of course, in the dark, because you've got that extra scent. Cheese paste works for chub all year round, but the problem you have with it in the summer, my son, is that it will start to get very warm and it will melt on a hot day. So take it in a cool box. It's very important that. It is a good bait, but I think for summer fishing, you know, I tend to go more towards sort of mini boilies and particles and pellets and maggots and castor and natural baits like slugs and worms, which are so brilliant for chub, mate. They're brilliant. The key to catching chub is stealth and concealment. It's not clomping around on the bank. If you want to catch chub, you can use quite strong gear, but you mustn't scare them. Isaac Walton called them the fearfulest of fishes, and what he meant by that was that they were easiest fish to get scared. Oh, what's this? King fishing. I went fishing yesterday, got some thornback rays, very nice. Great, of course, going off the coast at the moment because you've got plenty of space, haven't you? Yeah, Black Country Piker, Steve saying that it's like catching one from the Little River Stour in the Midlands. It is. Colourful rod, you wouldn't miss that, says Harry D. Well, you're right, mate. You know, the community's divided on the colour, actually, but one thing's for sure, you can't miss them. Mick and I used them, actually, a little while ago for an angling direct live project where we went out to catch pike, and all everybody talked about were these kind of fire red, bright orange rods that we were using, but they were really, really good. Now, I've been asked by Jeffrey Bow whether I can recommend a place to fish in South Yorkshire. Well, do you know what, Jeffrey? I am embarrassed to admit that I can't really, quite honestly, because Yorkshire is one county which I haven't spent a great deal of time fishing. And to be quite honest, I drove through it about 6 months ago and it was absolutely stunning and I sincerely regret it. But perhaps you can tell me where I should be fishing if ever I manage to get up that way. Gadavros saying that minnow's a good bait for chub, and he's absolutely right. In the old days, people just used to forage bait for chub. You know, if there's a bit of luncheon meat or bread hanging around in the house, you might take that. But if you hunted around in nature, you could always find slugs in the summer, especially on the garden early in the morning. You can always find worms, of course. But I've known people catch them on crickets and all kinds of stuff. You know, chub are opportunists, and they'll also eat weed as well as meat. So they're actually omnivorous. And at certain times of the year, they eat quite big quantities of weed, actually. But it's not really an effective way of fishing for them. Although in the old days, people used to take silkweed off the rim of the weir and use that. It's absolutely amazing, isn't it? Nigel Noble, how are you? Nice to see you, mate. Michael Harrington. Here's one from Joe Alexander. He says, these live shows are great, Matt, but will there ever be another series with you and the Duke or just yourself? Well, actually, Joe, that's a really interesting question. And I think the answer to that is it's a little bit difficult, really, because the power of television has diminished, as you know. I mean, we're all doing this now, whereas 10 years ago, this wouldn't have been happening. And you can't ignore modern trends. So I'm not against telly and I'm not against doing television. But there is one big stumbling block, mate, and that's called funding. It costs a lot of money to do television. And the problem for sponsors is there just isn't enough return. There are not enough people watching television. So as far as I can see, the future is to take things like this, which are, if you like, funded from the ground up. So I started the Matt Hayes Fishing Show about 6 weeks ago on Facebook to really try it out. And it's just gone nuts. And during that time, the show's attracted sponsors. It's got competition prizes. It's got a big following. It's become half of a kind of chat show, half of a late night show. And I'm looking towards the future and thinking about staging things like national rod race days and stuff. But the best way for me to do it, the best way to empower me, is to empower me on social media, because I control it, mate. You control it. It is ours. The show is what we want to make of it. So I take your point, and I'm not, you know, I'll talk to any broadcasters, but seriously, if it was down to me, if I fix on one priority, it will definitely be this, because this is the future, Joe. But thanks for your question. Linda Saxon reckons that she's caught fish on licorice all sorts. That does seem a bit of a push, but I can believe it. I mean, They'll eat chips. I know that. If you get any chip shop near to a river, and you'll find the chub will eat the chips. They love them. And, you know, there's a good reason why. Here's a great question, actually. This one's come from Andrew Kenworthy. And he says, if you're only allowed to fish one type of fish for the rest of your days, what would it be? To fish for one type of fish? It's such a difficult question, actually, that is. I don't think I could properly answer it. Because there's not one fish. It would probably have to be chub, because I'll answer my own question. There's a few contenders, but the thing with chub is you can catch them summer and winter, and they're very widespread. And I like the simplicity of chub fishing. So if I was really, really ultra pushed, it probably would be chub. But believe it or not, maybe pike. I've grown increasingly fond of pike over recent years. And also potentially wild brown trout on a fly, which is fantastic. And I do a lot of here in Norway in the summer. Now then, we've already seen a catfish film and we've seen Babs Kijewski catching a really big carp. But one thing I promised at the top of the show here was the possibility of watching Sir Michael Brown trying to convince me that eel fishing is a good idea. So what happened was Mick sent me a film. And basically, it was all right and everything. It was a load of clips of him eel fishing. But I decided that because he really loves eel fishing and I don't really get it, that I would play with it a bit. So I'll admit right now that this is not the film that the Duke sent me. But I honestly think it is all the better for it. So let's just bring up the Duke. And you'll get the idea as we watch this together.
Well, this could be one of my biggest challenges yet. I'm trying to film myself catching an eel in the pitch black. And it's not easy holding the camera yourself, and it's not easy catching the eel, to be honest, but I'm going to have a go. And I'm set up on a gravel pit in Lincolnshire. And I've not caught eels in this pit before, but I've caught them on the adjoining pit, so I'm sure there'll be some in here. Well, I've just been to my rods. I've just missed a bite. Something's picked up the worms. It's only literally moved the bobbin a few inches and dropped it. So, oh, that's better. It'll keep me going for another hour. Well, back in the van again. I've just missed another bite, and I think it's because there's been quite a big moon tonight, and it's very, very bright, and it's probably stopping the eels from really feeding like they should. But I reckon it's probably about 3 pounds or so. Oh, it's a right wriggler. I knew I shouldn't have gone out and tried to film catching eels, but anyway, the effort was worth it, and I've got one to show the camera. So there it is, a nice eel taking on worm from a Fenland gravel pit in the middle of the night.
Well, what do you think about that? Honestly, I can't see the point wrestling with one in the middle of the night. I just don't. Harry D says, can you tell the eel and cross story, Matt? Yes, I will do that in a second. Matthew Randall loves it. So did I. Leroy, well, you know, I know some people thought I was being cruel to it when they saw it earlier in the week. It wasn't at all. It's just a bit of getting my own back. Hello, Rachel Banford. Carolyn Kingsnorth says, my 7-year-old daughter wants to know how long you've been fishing for. Probably too long, actually. But the truth is, I've been fishing for 55 and a bit years. Can you believe that? I can't believe that. I still feel like I'm 18. Unfortunately, I no longer look like I'm 18. And I no longer feel necessarily physically I'm 18, but I'm not doing too badly anyway. Matthew Randall, if you enjoyed my practical joke on the Duke, of course, send your appreciation in. Just pop some comments on there, folks, will you? And also, this eel thing. Convince me, please. Convince me that eels are a good thing, that fishing for eels is a good thing, because I just don't get it. Some good questions coming in now. There's one I've got to go back to because I promised to tell. For Harry D, asked me to tell the story of the eel and the cross. Right. So in medieval times, eels were thought to be the devil's fish, right? So they spawned by the devil and witches and whatnot. And what they used to do as proof of this incredible revelation, they used to carve a cross in the ground and lay an eel on its back in a cross, and it would lie still and die. Right? So now Harry D, when I first told him this story down in Devon, he didn't believe me. But what happens is if you take an eel and it doesn't have to be a cross actually, but if you score the ground just about an inch deep or even half an inch deep, a couple of centimetres with a knife, and you've got an eel and you lay it on its back, it will literally lie there almost comatose, paralysed. And then if you right it again, put it back, no problem. I've tried it years ago and it worked 2 or 3 times. Doesn't do the eel any long-lasting harm as long as you sort of pick it up and put it back in the water, because they are quite capable of living out of the water quite a long time. And the thing with eels that we know about now is how important they are. And I've got a film about eels later, which I think you'll find absolutely fascinating. It's a really great film. It's about the life cycle of the eel, but it's also about the elvermen. So anyway, have your say on eels, but don't expect me to believe you. Okay, so what's the next question? We've done how old I am, which is terrible. One about catching grayling in fast water. Who is that? Peter Marsden. Peter, the best way to catch grayling, full stop, is fly fishing, my son. They are relatively easy fish to catch. They don't actually fare that well with bait fishing, unfortunately. Catching and releasing them all the time, it doesn't do them the best of good. But having said that, if you want to catch a grayling and you just want to catch one, then trotting with a float and maggots or bread is a very good bait actually for grayling also. Sweet corn, they love it. You need to go to a river where there's plenty in there. But my advice to you, if you want to make grayling fishing difficult, learn to fly fish. It is the only way, honestly, mate. But they're a terrific fish. I love them. And every year I devote some time out here in Norway fishing for big grayling. And I've had fish to, well, just on £4 on dry flies. So it's not a slouches method. Anyway. Wendy Aldrich. How are you, Wendy? Hi, Matt. What's the best bait for ghost carp? They seem to love the bread on Saturday. Well, let me tell you. The thing with ghost carp is that they do spend a lot of time on the surface and they are very inquisitive. But because they get cast at quite a lot, because they can be seen, when normal carp are swimming around below the surface, you don't see them so easily, Wendy. But a ghost carp is very, very visible. Me and my mate fly fish for them. And we literally target them and just drop the fly onto the nose, just blink, blink. And eventually they just take it out of reaction. They can't help themselves. But with conventional tactics, surface fishing is a very good tactic for grass carp, not grass carp, ghost carp, because you can see them. And if you can see them, it means that you can present the bait to them a bit more than you would the other fish. But what you've got to remember is that the grass carp get fished for more than the other carp on the surface. But I would say, in my experience, although I've caught ghost carp on all kinds of baits, from naturals and boilies and pellets, corn, probably number one for me has been floating pellets and possibly floating bread, which, you know, is another timeless, wonderful method of fishing, which just totally gets overlooked. Couple more questions. Yes. Now, Marcus Stone said, did you ever beat that £37 carp off the surface, Matt? When he was, that was in 24-hour rod race. I did, mate. I caught one bigger on a fly, believe it or not. But that's another story. But I had a huge fish on the fly. Anyway, £37 is pretty good though, isn't it? I've never managed a 40. I've had a couple of I caught the Thorpe Park Common once, on a do that Dynamite Baits were organising, and a whole load of luminaries from the angling world were there, including Terry Hearn. In fact, Terry was fishing for it, and I managed to catch this thing just floater fishing for about 10 minutes with one of the lads who was bailiffing the pool. And of course, everybody gathered round, and we made a big thing of it at the time. But the reality is, I was just very lucky. There were 200 carp in the pool, and I caught the one everyone was trying to fish for. And that was over sort of mid 34, 35. I can't remember. I'm terrible with the weights of fish, but it was a good one. I promise you that. Let's have a look. What else have we got? Now this must be about eels from Michael Harrington. I've got you, haven't I? Is it true that they can travel over land, Matt? Yes, it is true that eels can travel over land. So what you'll see later is the life history of the eel. But what it doesn't tell you, because there isn't time really, is that the problem that eels have got once they reach fresh water in the UK now is that all the migratory systems have been blocked off. So all of the lock gates, which used to be made of wood and leaked water, but the eels could crawl up them. The new metal gates, they can't crawl up. So all these pilings that are now made of shiny metallic materials, it's no good for the eels. And a lot of their traditional routes into the feeder ditches and streams and ponds and lakes of Britain. Because what eels do is they basically go out to the Sargasso Sea, thousands of miles away, and they spend a year after they've been born from egg, literally a year just drifting on the oceanic currents. Initially, they're like tiny little clear translucent flatfishes, and then they reach the coast, they change into small eels, glass eels, and you'll see all of that in the show later. But they are fascinating. It's just I don't like wrestling with them in the middle of the night. Have you ever fished the lock in Cork Island for carp, Patrick Quinn? No, I haven't, mate. But I did come and open a tackle shop in Cork once, and I heard all about it. I know that the carp in there are very famous. And in fact, a friend of mine, Simon Bond, who runs Free Spirit Fishing, Simon lived in Ireland for a while, and he fished for the carp in Cork. Fascinating, mate. Fascinating. You know, there's a hotel in Trondheim in Norway where the fountain in the atrium in the centre of the reception had a pike living in it for years. It's one of the students put it in there. It's brilliant. I think I should bring it back, that. Right. Now, Mark writes, saying I fished 15 years on the canal and caught pike, tench, big perch and even a terrapin, but never an eel. Is it time to go out and target them? Am I missing out? No, mate. I mean, if you're going to go down the canal, there's gudgeon, stone loach, sticklebacks, all preferable to those slimy, horrible things. No, I'm only joking. I've had some good eels off the cut, actually. Very neglected fishing places. Now, the thing with eels is you need to study the head of the eel, because if the eel's head is very blunt, so if I can hold up my hands like this, and if you look at the shape of my fingers as they curve over, if the eel's head is more rounded and blunt, it means it's a fish eater. If its nose is sharply pointed, more thin at the end, I know it's a terrible illustration, they normally eat mollusks and worms and grub around on the bottom, but the ones with broad flat heads, they're fish eaters. Why are we talking about eels? For heaven's sake, if the Duke's on, he'll be loving this. Right, now, Linda Saxon, upper 7 for grayling. Used to be brilliant, mate, but I don't know now. I mean, I haven't fished it for a few years, but it's a wonderful place to fish up above Cairnsouth. That I do know. Phil Coupland's retracted his message for some reason. It must have been very insulting. Yes, Wendy Aldridge says try pellets. Yes, Wendy, do, because they're good. Did I ever chubfish the weir, Ray Allison? No, sorry, mate, I didn't. But you never know. One day, Matthew Randall, eels are the worst fish ever. There you go. I don't want to see the end of them. I mean, I want to save the eel. That's the bizarre thing. I just don't want to wrestle with them in the middle of the night. Marcus Stone, you love Eduardo eel. You love it. Yeah. You can tell I do, don't you? Courtney Rose Stewart, how are you? I love all kinds of fish, even eels. Me too, Courtney, but some more than others, obviously. Jeremy Kern, nothing funnier than watching the Duke unhooking an eel. There you are. I rest my case. Tim Bailey, hi Matt, what's the best way of putting line on a spool from scratch? Well, actually, I did have a film about that, and it's a shame. I don't think I've still got it here, but I will try and dig it out for next time. I'll tell you what, folks, some great questions coming in. Why don't we have a look at Derek Spence, because Derek is 86 years old, and there's a company called Fuka Baits, and yes, you've got to be careful when you say that. I've nearly fallen foul a few times. And one of the things that they do is they drive around and literally jump out of a car at a fishery and give people their bait and say, "Yeah, mate, try that." And it's getting a lot of attention. We've been talking about this stuff on the show for a little while. So anyway, one of the people that Fuka picked on was Derek Spence, who's 86 years young. And anyway, this is what Derek thinks, and I think this is brilliant.
Right, my name's Derek Spence and I'm 86 years old. I've been fishing about 76 years. I fish 12 months a year. Don't often catch very much. We got here, it was -3. And we've been struggling all morning, catching a few silverfish. Then this young nice gentleman came along and gave us a few bags of this new bait. So straight away we put some on the hook, and I've had 3 good fish in the last 25 minutes or so, whereas before we were struggling to get a bite. So yes, it's got the thumbs up for me. It's a very versatile bait, and it can be moulded to any shape that you want or form. Add it, take it away, and it seems to catch fish.
There you go. How about that? That Fuka bait is actually very interesting stuff. I'll come on to that in a minute, but just have a couple of other questions. Steve up in the Black Country again. Fly fishing in the West Midlands. Any tips? Well, actually, if you want to have a really nice time, I would try and catch some of the wild trout in the West Midlands, because, well, on the edges, maybe Shropshire and that sort of thing in the streams. They're not big fish, but you will not fish more beautiful places than some of the small wild Shropshire streams. But living where you do, mate, you know, a very fine place to learn to fly fish on running water anyway would be on the River Wye, where you'd have a good chance of catching salmon. You need to be down more on the bottom beats towards the tidal, I think. Around Bigswear sort of area, and 1 or 2 of the good beats. But there's salmon to be caught, and it is feasible to do it. My mate Ed Brown scoops. He catches several a year off the Wye, every year. But he's a fine salmon fisherman. But give it a go, mate. I mean, the other thing is to learn to fly fish for pike. It's one of the best things you'll ever do. I love fly fishing for pike. It's probably the best way you can catch pike. It's got limitations at times, which is the distance you can cast. And you have got to learn to cast great big budgery gars. But apart from that, it's brilliant, mate. Leroy. Great question, actually. He says, where did you start fishing and who's your fishing hero? Well, I've had a number of fishing heroes, Leroy. My biggest fishing hero is my dad. My dad's still going strong and still wetting a line, not as much as he did well into his 80s now, but he's fabulous. A lot of you may have met him if you fished at the Monument or down at Hampton Load fishing for the barbel on the Severn. You might have bumped into my dad. My granddad, both of my granddads were fishermen, and my granddad on my mum's side particularly was highly influential, Leroy, and very important to me actually. And we lived in Smethwick in the Midlands, and it was the Park Lakes and the canals and a lot of the sort of polluted waterways, I suppose, where I really cut my teeth. But there was something that always fascinated me about water, and I was just drawn to it and anything in it. And I started off fishing for sticklebacks and little tiddler nets, and then Edgbaston Reza. Fished there as a real youngster. I can remember when Edgbaston Reza had red squirrels, and then next year we went and there were no red ones left, only grey ones. But anyway, so that's my background. My big angling hero as a youngster growing up was Pete Stone, and I got to fish with Pete on many times. Sadly, no longer with us, but what a gentleman, and he'll always be a hero to me. And contemporary, the people I fish with, mate. My mates, the Duke and Ed Brown, my mate Gaz, my mate Rich Lee. They've taught me so much, even though they're my mates. And that's how it should be, Leroy, isn't it? Let's have a look. Paul Bottrell, he's trying to light the blue touch paper. Paul, what do you think about chub and barbel in ponds? Chub, yes. Barbel, no, in a nutshell. I just think barbel are a fish that thrive better in running water. The ones I've seen in still waters, particularly commercial fisheries, look all pale and washed out to me. They don't look happy. And I'm not convinced they live very long, to be honest. So barbel don't seem to flourish in still waters, but for some strange reason, chub do. And I'm quite happy with chub in canals and ponds. They like those sort of conditions, whereas barbel don't gravitate to those places through choice. That's probably that, but that's my personal choice. Some people love fishing for barbel. I mean, you know, and that's the point about fishing. There's loads of different ways you can do it. Let's have a look now. Courtney Rose Stewart, her daddy's Les Stewart. Ah, right, okay. Well, good to hear from you, Courtney. Now, there's quite a lot of things on here. Harry D. Ed Brown, his father played for Warwickshire County Cricket Club. Correct. Well done, Harry. Absolutely right. Sid Barrett, how are you, mate? The man with the great avatar and name. Sid Barrett from Pink Floyd. Not the Sid Barrett, but a bloke who really likes or whatever. Anyway, his avatar is Sid Barrett. It's absolutely amazing. Kaza saying that she loves me. That's wonderful. But I expected no less, of course. Looked after me well today, Kaza. Well done. Right. Matt, is a 9 centimetre soft shad lure too big for perch, or will I be battered by pike? No, mate, it's not. It's not big. It's not too big for a big perch. Some of the biggest perch I've caught on lures have been on big lures, and I'm talking about the Rapala Super Shad Wrap, and that's a lure the size of your hand. It's like a hand-sized roach. So no, I mean, I'm not saying advocating all. You should always go out and fish with them, but when I tell you that one of the biggest perch I never caught was one that was trying to eat a 2-pounder on my hook. I'm not joking. So don't underestimate perch. If they can get it in their mouth, boy, they'll get it in there. But okay, yes, 9-inch. Give it a go. I'd say 4, 5, 6-inch is still a reasonably large lure for a perch. But try it, mate. Who knows? No, there isn't just one rule book, or there might be, but there's lots of entries in it. Kevin Smitherman saying he loves crucian fishing. Seems to be a dying art on light tackle. Absolutely right, it does, and I love it too. Big Gazzy Gas, or is that Big Gassy Gaz or Big Gazzy? Anyway, you know who you are, and probably your mates do as well. Although I'd imagine if you are Big Gassy Gaz, social distancing might not be a problem for you, mate. I would have thought. Anyway, he says I'm a legend. He probably doesn't think that anymore, but it's good to have you on board, Gaz, and everyone else. I'm knocked out by the response to this. It's lovely to see you all here. Sean Hinchcliffe and wants to know, have you ever fished with the late, great John Wilson? No, I haven't. But I have spent quite a bit of time with John, and have had immense respect for Wilson. He was a top-notch angler. And don't let anybody tell you any different, because if they do, they don't know what they're talking about. To make that many successful programs and to keep fishing as simple as he did, because Wilson's approach to fishing was always simple. He never, ever overcomplicated it. And you couldn't tell him what he should like. He knew what he wanted. He knew what he liked. And he was quite, single-minded in that respect, in my experience. Like a lot of great people. But what a fisherman. And what a broadcaster. We are, without a doubt, people like him and Jack Hargreaves, we'll probably never see the like of again. But that's why I think, coming back to this, why this is important, because for me, in terms of my future, I'm fed up with pitching up to television companies and going to Cap in Hand, seeing if they'll let me make a programme. Let them come to me. Because, make no mistake, people are noticing this show because it's growing so fast, and it's going to happen after tonight. I mean, we're going to have to sort how we do this in the future, because I can tell you, one thing is for sure, this show is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger on YouTube. It is. So thank you everyone for being part of the first one. It's amazing to have you aboard. I did talk to you about Carp Kitchen earlier on. I really like this. I got a new sponsor on board for the show on the Facebook page last week, which was DNA Baits. And I know DNA Baits are really popular actually because they've brought quite a few people with them to watch the show. It's basically a top quality bait company. It's mail order, but the principle is that the more kilos you buy, the more the price per kilo comes down. That's their big thing. But anyway, that's not the point of this. The point of this is Lee Morris talking about how he actually uses liquid additives to add extra edges to his bait in the very first episode of Carp Kitchen. So let's watch now.
Designed to work anywhere and instantly, the Secret 7 is the most popular bait within the DNA bait range, and for good reason. But there's a few edges you can employ to make it even better. One of them edges being liquids. Kickstarting things off with the hydro spod syrup. As the name would suggest, this has been designed to go on to all of your spod mixes. Whether that be in your pellets, your hemp, corn, crumbed up boilie. The great thing about the hydro spod syrup is it is a very heavy liquid. As you'll see, when I pour it into this glass, the liquid sinks instantly to the bottom, so it's not hanging up inside the water columns here. It goes straight to the bottom and starts working from the minute it hits the water. So where you would put this onto your spod mixes, like I say, them finer particles, things like hemp, boilie crumb, your corn, it'll douse and surround itself all around them finer particles, get them straight down to the bottom of the lake bed, and that's where the liquid attraction starts working instantly from the bottom up. Most liquids, they would disperse within the water columns, whereas the hydro spod syrup, it sinks straight to the bottom, gets them finer particles down to the bottom of the lake bed, and then starts working instantly. Moving on to the bait soak. As the name would suggest, this is perfect for your hook baits. So glugging all of them hook baits up, giving them the ultimate attraction. And moving on to my favourite, the liquid food. This has been designed for your freebies in mind. So for your freezer baits or your shelf life, douse all them freebies over with the liquid food. It will take on all of that attraction, and that will give you that little bit more of an edge over everyone else, and giving all of your freebies that ultimate pimpage with the liquid food. All of these liquids, as of the whole range of DNA baits, is available on our website at www.dnabaits.com.
Well, there you go, folks. Lee Morris with his take on how you can spice up your carp baits with some liquid additives. And I make him right. Some of those tricks can really, really pay off. And I also know that some of that DNA baits is very, very good stuff. I've got a couple of cracking questions in a minute. Actually, Courtney Rose Stewart asking me, what's my least favourite fish? Eels, Courtney. Boom, boom. Walk straight into that one. I don't really have a least favourite fish. It's not fair because all fish are fascinating in their own way, I think. It's just that I like fishing for some more than others, Courtney. You lot on YouTube, you know, are welcome to take advantage of this because basically DNA have offered 15% discount on all of their stuff apart from bulk specials until the 20th of May to followers of my stuff. So if you use MHFS15 as a code, if you're a DNA customer or you're not yet but you think you might want to be, and on their site if you use the code MHFS15, you will get a 15% discount on DNA baits, which I think is pretty dash good. I don't know about you. Please let me know about the stuff that you like in the comments and things. You know, the great thing about a lot of the people I interact with on Facebook and on here is that, you know, basically it's a great crowd of people. You're all a good bunch. And a lot of the sponsors I work with, they all say the same thing. What a great bunch of people. And that's the way we're going to keep it, folks. So if you like the idea of being able to get extra discounts as a, you know, follower of the show, then, you know, let me know. If you don't like it, let me know. But we'll work on the show content together. Sean Hathaway says, John Wilson, Matt Hayes, Des Taylor are my heroes. Well, that's lovely to hear. Very nice company for me to be in. Des, a fellow Midlander, and obviously Mr. Wilson, everybody knows a bit about him. Someone did ask me earlier on about whether I'd actually any Bob Nudd stories. I think it was Harry D. It was Harry D. No, actually, Harry, I've never fished with Bob, although I know Mick has, the Duke has, quite regularly. But I've met Bob on quite a few occasions. In fact, I've got a picture of him. I'll have to dig it out, of me and him together about 2 years ago at a show. Top bloke, really nice guy, Bob. Totally relaxed, real gent, dead easy to get on with. Yeah, a real good one. Paul Geary says, Matt, do you think the one way, mate? It could stay the same, but eventually it'll probably get broken. Most of them do. I mean, having said that, there are that go back historically that haven't moved much. Pike is certainly one of them. Roach is another one. And it's basically all the fish that can't be, if you like, educated into becoming much bigger. In other words, sort of force-fed with bait. They're all the ones like roach, which no matter how much you try, it's very difficult to change the habits of roach. There are one or two still waters where people sort of bolt rig for them and fish for them that way. But generally speaking, roach are pretty difficult to grow on to big sizes. So too a barbel, unless, you know, you feed them lots of pellets and boilies, and that's the point really. That's where all the records have changed. If you look at the others, they haven't changed that much. Roach is one, rudd's one, pike's another one. Perch have definitely got bigger in the last few years, but whether that's because of an increase in the amount of things like signal crayfish and other parts of the food chain that weren't present a few years ago, I'm not sure, mate. But records are there to be broken. And what I've always said to people, if you're watching this and you love fishing, remember one thing. They won't put your personal best list on your headstone. So keep it in perspective, folks. Because I realised one thing years ago, when sometimes I was pushing it even too hard at times to try and catch a big fish, until I suddenly realised a few years down the line, the fish that I thought was big 10 years ago, people don't think it's big now and wouldn't understand that effort. So the key to fishing is to enjoy it and to get in tune with it and find your groove and just work that groove. It's what makes you happy. That's what it's for. Soothes the soul, soothes the mind, takes your troubles away, any version you like. Nobody's banned. Don't matter where you come from, what you look like, you can fish. And so you make your own rules up in that sense. Of course, we're sporting and we respect nature. Those are the very common things that bond us together, as well as, of course, a love of fish. So talking of fish, we've already dealt with a little bit of catfish. Let me just answer this question, actually. Matthew Randall said, I had a fish from a commercial water which looked half sander and half perch. But I spoke to you on Twitter and it turned out it was a pumpkin seed. Yes, there are a few pumpkin seeds. Now, were we to restage the rod race, back in the day when we did the rod race, you know, I think we caught 42 or 43 species of fish, freshwater fish. And inevitably, you always got some bloke saying, why didn't you catch a pumpkin seed? And well, mate, they're not, one, they're not indigenous. And two, there's about 6 of them in the country. Do you honestly think we're going to get one in a month of Sundays? So apart from that, though, we probably picked off, well, nearly all of them because we looked at the list. I mean, we even caught Arctic char. I wouldn't like to try and do that now. But I will have some information about rod racing. I've got some ideas and we'll come to that. Not in this show, but probably in a different one. So anyway, Matthew, glad to know that your fish that was half zander, half perch, was in fact a pumpkin seed. Anyway, mate, if you catch another one, send me a picture of it, because I can't recall seeing one. I'm not making fun, honestly. Pumpkin seeds are quite rare. Michael Joyce, have you gone salmon fishing the River Moy in County Mayo? I know you fished them on the Shannon. I did, and the answer's no. I fished on the Shannon, but most of my salmon fishing these days is on Gowler, which is flowing about a few hundred yards away from me right now. So I'll be salmon fishing here. This summer we've got some huge salmon. In fact, next week, I can promise you, the next Matt Hayes YouTube will be on Saturday or Sunday night, probably Sunday night, but I'll announce it, and in that we'll have a look at a bit of Norway salmon fishing. Ashley Bolam saying I'm an absolute leg end. Thanks, mate. Okay, right, let's have a look. Another question. That looks nice and smelly. I don't know what that just popped off there. I don't know what you're referring to. Probably best I don't, actually. Right, reminds me, who's this? Wendy Aldridge. Reminded me of the Mighty Boost. What Eels? Yeah, what a show that was. Somebody mentioning my old friend Jan Porter. Any stories of you and the late Jan Porter? Yes. Matthew Randall and Marcus Stone. I have actually. Many years ago, the first time I came to Norway actually was with Jan, and we came on a journey of discovery because his grandmother was Norwegian, and we went to a very small town called Åndalsnes, and it's a place I've visited many times since. It's a beautiful little town, and we sat at Jan's grandmother's school desk in this little schoolroom, and I remember he started to cry and I was crying with him. It was an amazing trip, actually, very emotional. I mean, we had some good fishing experiences. It didn't always go well, but it was incredibly funny. And we travelled up the coast of Norway in an old school bus. It was just nut stuff, really, to be honest. But anyway, you know, these are the things you do. Let's have a look now. Sid Barrett talking about Jack Hargreaves, mate. I wish. I mean, what a broadcaster he was. I mean, can you imagine trying to do out of town in Kent now? It'd be very difficult, I would think. Right, what's your favourite piece of fishing tackle, says Gooner Shane. I'm not a pimp, mate, you know. I'm not a tackle pimp. I'm not a tackle tart. Definitely something functional. I suppose over the years, it'd probably be the old Abu multipliers. I think they're the only reels that I ever sort of half collected. The old Abu classic ambassadors. When Ed Brown and me were fishing in Sweden many years ago, for quite a few years, we used to go into the tackle shops there and buy up limited edition ambassadors in funny colours, and you know. So I mean, definitely ambassadors. Of modern tackle, I like tackle that I really need to use. So in my salmon fishing, for example, I use Hardy Cascapedia reels, which are very beautiful. They're old traditional design, but the brake system on them is essential for the big fish on Gowler. So we have to have good reels, and there's only a handful that you can actually use. So for that reason, it'd be them. But I, you know, stuff that's around at the moment. I like lures. You know, I like the new Berkeley Pulse spin tail baits. They're brilliant, cute little things. But you know, I don't get hung up on it, mate, to be honest. So probably that's not the answer you were hoping for, but it's the truth, really. Now let's just have a look at what's coming up next. So what I'd like to do now is give you a nice family report. This is Zenia Drury-Gregorek, who's a regular reporter on the show. And Zen helps to run Anglers Paradise down in Devon, and she's got a wonderful fishing family. And this is the day when her and her family very recently went out and they caught some terrific catfish. So let's have a look at what Zenia has got to do.
Wow, look at that. Zane's personal best. What's just happened, Zane?
I've caught the queen of the lake, it might be.
And what was the fight like?
A shark.
Like a shark. Amazing.
Oh, my arms. Oh, I'm so nervous. It's an amazing feeling. Hey, to the island. Oh my God. Right, let's get it in the net. Oh my God, I've just caught my biggest 4 pound Wells catfish, and her name is Scarface. I am shaking with an adrenaline. The fight was out of this world. I'm to release her. It's ridiculous. It's my birthday soon, and this is like the biggest birthday treat I could ask for. So, and it's a moment I shared with my boys, Zane and ZJ, and Daddy Joe. So, let's put her back. She's a lively one. Bye-bye. Woo! Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Just out of this world. Oh my God.
Well, that's enough of that. This is a family show, obviously. We just better cut it off there. But seriously, what a great achievement. And, you know, I mean, I'm tempted to say to the people all agreeing with me about eels, what about catfish? I mean, if you've ever fished for catfish, it honestly is one of the most slimy experiences you could ever possibly have. You can see that Zen and her family have fished from before, because did you know she was wearing neoprene chest waders? I learned quite early on, if you were going to go night fishing for catfish, wear some old waders, because you'd go home. I mean, literally, your clothes the next day, they'd be covered in slime so much you could take your t-shirt off and put it in the corner of the room and it'd be standing there 5 days later. So anyway, that's catfishing, you know. Some people absolutely love it. And seriously, I mean, the atmosphere of the night. If you get a bite off catfish, it's sensational. I remember once, very naughty, fishing with Kevin Maddox in Fisherville in France, years and years and years ago. And he was trying to talk me into putting this massive toad that we found on the patio. Honestly, it was huge, this toad. It was huge. And he said, put that out of bait as bait. He said, there's big cats in here, they'll have that. I said, I'm not putting that out. I don't want to touch it. It was huge. It was like hopping across the path, you know. He went, hang on a minute. And he ran inside our little chalet and he got a saucepan and put it on this big toad. And you could hear it going against I said, I'm not putting it out. Anyway, eventually, I said, look, I'd got a skimmer bream thing. So I put it out, this skimmer bream. And Maddox insisted on rowing this bait out about 150 yards. So anyway, put the bait out, and the swim was right next to our little villa where we were staying, me and Kevin. So we were sitting inside having a cup of tea, and the rods are only like 12 foot away, watching them through the door. Anyway, it's dark, and all of a sudden, I had this absolutely spool melting run. And at that time, people hadn't seen huge catfish. Maddox had only just started going to Lactus and Cassian to try and catch them and things like that. Anyway, I had this spool melting run. I stumbled out with Kevin behind me, laughing his head off. I fell on the ground and crunched my knee, and I was crawling to the rod, and he was roaring this thing. And eventually, just as I got to it, the run stopped, and that was the end of that. So I never did get my big Fisherville catfish, sadly. Folks, we're coming up to the top of the hour now, and not too long to go. I'll try and squeeze in a couple more questions before I do go, though. If you're looking at shoutouts, please make sure that you add in where you're watching from, please, because that's always interesting to me, and it's nice to know where you're from, and, you know, give your area a shout out and everything, you know. Somebody who says, Wendy Aldridge saying, go girl. I tell you, honestly, Wendy, I am surrounded by like this female mafia with Babs and Zenia, and it's ridiculous. But the fact of the matter is, they are doing fantastic work. You know, catching fish and entertaining people. You can't knock it. I'm all for it. Damo666, please check out the work that A Bite Out of Cancer do. I've seen it, mate, because actually, Damo, they follow me on Twitter. So from time to time, I do see stuff. Graham, I'm not going to tell Zenia that she's got a resemblance to her dad. She knows it, but she'd probably whack you if you did. Anyway, well, what's this? What was that implement? This is Tim Bailey, that you used with Luke Moffat for catching catfish on the Somme. Was it called a clonk? Yeah. It's basically a wooden thing. You hit the water with it and it makes a low resonance sound. And that low resonance sounds like a bloop, bloop. And the fish can sense it and feel it through the water. Marcus Stone, watching in sunny South London. Good lad. Kevin Prestland, where are you watching, Kev? Where? In Hertfordshire. Graham Cockings from Bedford. Fished the Eels a lot, actually, Graham, round your way, mate, over the years. Francis Logan. Frankie's from Scotland in Clydebank. Good lad. My daughter Jess and her old man, and my older son Dan live up in Bonnie, Scotland, mate. Love it. Michael Joyce watching in County Mayo. Good to see you, Michael. Buster Boy Darling, Smith. Good to see you, sir. Checking in watching in Kent. Chris Caruzzi, did you ever fish with Andy Little? Once. Many moons ago when we were on a trip to Italy once. But I don't remember much about it. Paul Cole watching from West Brom. Good lad. Martin Faulkner, please shout out. Ashley from the sunny side of Blackpool, beneath British waters. Hi Matt, been filming grayling in fast shallow water on the River Wharfe with astonishing results. My filming is better than my fishing. Listen, let's do it. Let's do grayling next time, Mark. I did a little bit earlier on, but they are fabulous fish. If you've got good footage, you can always send me footage at Matt Hayes Fishing Show at outlook.com, Mark. So remember that, mate. Carolyn Kingsnorth was watching from Maidstone. Thank you for clearing that up, Carolyn. Matthew Randall is from High Wycombe. I learned all sorts of stuff about people tonight. Paul Bottrell was watching from Hull. Linda Saxon, it's raining in Wolvo. Well, of course it is. It's always raining in Wolvo, Linda. Don't be ridiculous. Rumble-tumpton. Any fishing ghost stories? Well, actually, yes. I have a couple. I'll tell you what. They'll be short. What we're going to do now first, before we go on to my fishing ghost stories, is can I just show you this film about eels? We'll watch that together. Do a few shout outs. I'll tell you a couple of fishy ghost stories and then it'll be time to say goodnight. So first of all, before we go any further, this film, just a little bit about the films in the Matt Hayes Fishing Show. It takes a couple of days to put them together. My filmmaking is quite slow. I tend to take my time. I'm not very quick at it, but they are very much me and they are an expression of personality, if you like. So please, everybody, this is the time when I met the elvermen of the lower Severn. Now, before I met them, I was warned that they were a bit of a rum bunch. And I'd heard one or two stories, because in the old days, there was a lot of money made in elvers, and I mean a lot of money. And there are a few rum lads involved in it, but I'll tell you what, the boys I met, if they're anything like the rest, there ain't nothing wrong with them. Elver Dave and Andrew and Bill were terrific. So we're going to start off looking at the fascinating life history of the eel and how it works. And then we're going to have a look at the elvermen. The European eel. Its Latin name is Anguilla anguilla. And while much of the eel's life, especially its early life, remains a mystery, it is known that they breed many thousands of miles away in the Sargasso Sea and then drift. Their form at this stage more like translucent flatfishes than eels, for 300 days or more on the oceanic currents until they reach the European coast, whereupon they become tiny, transparent replicas of the adult glass eels. Eels drift around the coast seeking fresh water, and as they begin to enter the estuaries, they undergo another metamorphosis, developing yellow silver bellies and darker backs, whereupon they're referred to as elvers. After 5 to 20 years in fresh or brackish water, the eels become sexually mature, their eyes enlarge and they become silver and more white in colour. Using magnetoreception more finely honed than the best GPS systems, the eel makes its way to the Sargasso Sea to complete the cycle. My encounter with the elvermen of the lower Severn, traditional net fishers with territorial rights, took place one fine spring evening a few years ago. I was a little nervous, having heard all sorts of rumours about the so-called Elver Mafia. And yet 3 nicer blokes than Elver Dave, Andrew and Bill could I wish to have met. I discovered that the first part of a successful night's elvering starts with burgers cooked over an open fire.
The vocabulary of the elvermen. The spot where we fish, you would call that your tump. So that's where your fishing spot is called a tump.
Then you got things like swimming, whether the fish are swimming, whether they're sagging back, so they got a bit tired and they're coming back with a tide and you're catching them. So that's sagging. You got somebody asked what you're getting a shut. A shut is where you're tipping into your bucket. What's the other one, Dan?
Somebody asks you what you're catching, you lie through your teeth. It's called bullshit.
So, I had learned that elver fishing takes place from a spot called a tump. I watched as Dave and the lads submerged their nets into the water, facing the current, and waited. Every few minutes or so they would complete the shut by taking the net out and depositing the elvers into a bucket.
Best time for alver in here, you follow the tides and listen to where the fish are being caught, and as they slowly move up the river, we can predict roughly when they'll be here within a couple of days. So if they were caught at Maysmore 2 nights ago, then we'd expect them to be here tonight or tomorrow night.
You've got to, when you start catching, you've got to look after them. You've got to get them in trays, get them settled down, pour plenty of water over them. You don't keep them in water, they go in a mesh tray so the water drains through them. If you leave them in too much water, then obviously they use all the oxygen and drain. So you keep them in trays, like Andy said. One of us go on fishing, the other one will be up, traying up, keep on pouring water through. And like I say, the magical night is getting 30-40 kilos.
The lads were having a decent night and soon they began to transfer them onto trays. Many of the elvers were destined for a station in nearby Tewkesbury, manned by the Sustainable Eel Group chairman, Andrew Kerr.
We formed the Sustainable Eel Group to take action on behalf of the eel. The sort of things we've been doing have been to unblock the migratory pathways, and in the last 2 years, working with the Rivers Trust and the Environment Agency, over 600 solutions have now been implemented. We've still got tens of thousands to go, but it's a great start. Then we've been working with the fishermen themselves and the industry themselves to form a sustainable supply chain so that the consumer can buy eel and enjoy eating it, knowing that it's come from a sustainable source. And then the third thing we've been doing is we've been catching fish, and last year the fishermen gave over 1 million eels and then relocating them above the barriers.
The eels we delivered were earmarked to be transported and released into the streams, ditches and waterways of the UK. As the night wore on, tumps yielded dwindling returns, and before I knew it, my magical night with the elvermen was over.
Whereas now there's a little bit of money to be made, but it's fun. It's such good fun. Once you're into it, once you've been, it's in your blood. I mean, who in their right mind is going to stand on the bank of the River Severn, pouring with rain, to catch baby eels?
Well, I think you could say the same about fishing, couldn't you, really? At the end of the day, sums it all up in many, many ways. Those guys were terrific, Alva, Dave, and you saw Andrew talking there. Terrific guys. Did that a few years ago. Love to go back, and I will one day. Hi, John from Yorkshire. Due to fish the Ayr and Calder Canal on Thursday. Oh my God, it looks like I know loads about fishing that place, mate. I've struggled to tell you where it is on a map. Do I need dark or light ground bait? Light. No, I don't think it depends on the canal traffic, John. I mean, if the boats are on and they're stirring the water up, I can't see. I mean, normally dark ground bait, you want to put that in when the water's quite clear. So you probably don't need ground bait. The fish should be feeding anyway. But look, you probably know more than me. It's your local venue. But if it were me, I don't think I'd put dark ground bait in if the boats are moving and the water's got some colour in it. Just a few last shout outs now. Who we've got here? Kevin Preston mentioning the 2 catfish me and the Duke caught on wet nets, of course. Brilliant. Dave Patterson watching from London Bridge. Wendy Aldridge, good night to you as well. And Newton Abbott and Devon. Paul Bryan watching from Newton Abbott in Devon, a fine place. Thank you. Stephen Bourne, I've subscribed to Matt Hayes. Folks, if you do one thing tonight, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I've only really recently started to load films and create the content needed to grow it because I've been concentrating so much on Facebook. But now You know, I've come to YouTube with big ambition and the content will keep coming, but I need you to subscribe. So please subscribe, everybody, subscribe. You know it makes sense. And by subscribing, you'll know when the next live is on, which is going to be next weekend. Michael Harrington says, I reckon the TV people will be knocking on your door soon, Matt. I think they're missing great TV. I think they're all beginning to realise that, mate. But blood is thicker than water, and one rewards one's friends. And where I have the loyalty is in the grassroots. On here, my boy. So this is my priority, and will be for the future. Chasm Morningstar Turner, great that you've stayed on, but I knew you would. Andrew Knotts, hope to get you fishing in Scotland soon. You and me both, mate. Kazza wants to know, is this the blue shirt I wore for Earth's Wildest Waters? Not the very one, because they got a bit worn around the collar and the sunscreen and mozzie repellent actually bleached them a bit, if you want to know. But it's very like it, yeah. Blah, blah, blah. Right, let's have a look. Leroy, thank you for the show, mate. Thanks for following. That's the most important thing. Please share, get involved, follow, subscribe. That is what the Matt Hayes Fishing Show is about. It really is a show that's been started at grassroots. And basically, what we're going to do in future shows is increase the amount of content. And I'm going to be looking at ways to increase your participation in the show, and also to bring some of the fabulous prize draws and things that we have on the Facebook page to you, so that you can compete in the competitions, because they've been absolutely amazing. So I'm going to figure out how to do that, but at least we've got to start. We've got the first show on the road, and you know, I think that's a good achievement. So next weekend, Saturday or Sunday, I'll be back on bringing you another Matt Hayes live fishing show. Let's keep this going, folks. Subscribe, tell your friends, share, because basically this is the fishing show that's going places. It's the people's fishing show, and I'm determined to keep it going. It's going great guns on Facebook. I know it's going to go amazing on here, just judging by reaction tonight. So, hey, this is special. You're part of it. I need your support. I can't do it without you, but you have my commitment that if you're going to back this thing, so am I, folks. So I've absolutely loved this broadcast tonight. Thoroughly looking forward to the next one at the weekend, folks. Look out for that, please. And I always say this, I've wanted to say it for years, and now that I've got my own show where, you know, I control the thing and nobody can tell me anything to say, I can finish the show by saying the immortal words.